This show is part of OnePlace, a daily network of focused briefings across the stories people follow most.
Welcome to the program. I'm here with the latest updates on the expanding conflict in Iran, a major constitutional battle at the Supreme Court, and the longest government shutdown in American history.
Iran warns the U.S. against a looming ground invasion.
The Supreme Court weighs the future of birthright citizenship.
Public opinion remains deeply divided over automatic U.S. citizenship.
Trump allows a Russian oil tanker to reach Cuba.
The partial government shutdown is now the longest ever.
ICE agents may stay at airports after TSA pay.
Pope Leo XIV condemns the weaponization of Christian faith.
Senator Lankford supports putting American boots on the ground.
J.D. Vance suggests UFO sightings might actually be demons.
Millions join No Kings rallies to protest the administration.
First, the Iran conflict. The rhetoric coming out of Tehran has reached a fever pitch, as Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf accused the United States of secretly planning a ground invasion. This comes as the USS Tripoli arrived in the region carrying 3,500 Marines and sailors. Ghalibaf was very clear on Telegram, stating that Iranian forces are ready for any ground troops and will never accept humiliation. Meanwhile, regional powers like Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt are meeting in Islamabad to find a diplomatic exit, with Pakistan even offering to host direct talks between Washington and Tehran very soon.
It is a volatile situation, especially with Yemen's Houthis now launching missiles toward Israel, which threatens vital shipping lanes in the Red Sea. Domestically, Iran is reeling from overnight airstrikes that hit weapons production sites, though Tehran claims a university was also struck. In retaliation, the Revolutionary Guard has threatened American university campuses across the Middle East. This escalation follows Iran's rejection of a 15-point U.S. peace plan. Instead, Iran proposed a deal that would give them official control over the Strait of Hormuz and require the U.S. to pay for war damages, which seems like a non-starter for Washington.
Next, the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is set to hear oral arguments this Wednesday in Trump v. Barbara, a case that could fundamentally alter the 14th Amendment's guarantee of birthright citizenship. President Trump has argued that this privilege has been too freely applied to children of non-citizens, claiming hundreds of thousands are entering the country specifically for this reason. If the court sides with the administration, the change would apply to children born on or after February 20th, 2025. Projections suggest this could result in over 250,000 children being born without citizenship every single year, potentially reaching nearly 5 million children by the year 2045.
This decision carries massive implications for the American education system. Currently, the landmark Plyler v. Doe ruling ensures all children have access to free K-12 public education, regardless of their immigration status. However, schools serve as more than just classrooms. They provide free meals, mental health support, and services for students with disabilities. Without citizenship, accessing these vital services could become incredibly complicated. Advocates argue that birthright citizenship is essential for child well-being, ensuring that everyone starts life on equal footing. If that right is narrowed or ended, the path to higher education and social stability for millions of future residents could be permanently blocked.
Now, public opinion. As the High Court prepares for these arguments, public opinion on birthright citizenship remains complex and deeply divided. Most Americans strongly support granting citizenship to children of legal immigrants or those born to U.S. citizens. However, when it comes to children of undocumented immigrants, the consensus disappears. The United States is one of only about 36 countries that offer automatic citizenship based on the right of soil, or jus soli. This practice has roots in colonial history, but has been abandoned by many nations in recent decades, including the United Kingdom, India, and Ireland, which moved toward citizenship based on familial lineage or right of blood.
The 14th Amendment was originally enacted in 1868 to protect the rights of formerly enslaved people, stating that all persons born in the U.S. and subject to its jurisdiction are citizens. President Trump has made ending this practice a cornerstone of his second term, signing an executive order on his first day in office to ban it. The administration argues the clause is outdated and subject to abuse by those crossing the border illegally. Polls show that how the question is phrased significantly impacts the results, reflecting a nation that is still grappling with its identity as a land of immigrants versus the modern pressures of border security.
Moving to Cuba. In a surprising move, President Trump told reporters aboard Air Force One that he has no problem with a Russian oil tanker delivering relief to Cuba. The island has been struggling under a U.S. oil blockade that has caused widespread blackouts and crippled hospitals. The tanker, Anatoly Kolodkin, is carrying about 730,000 barrels of oil and is expected to arrive in Matanzas by Tuesday. Despite the vessel being sanctioned by the U.S. and EU following the war in Ukraine, Trump stated that if a country wants to send oil to help people survive, it doesn't bother him, even if that country is Russia.
This is a notable shift, given that the Trump administration has been more aggressive toward Cuba than almost any other in recent history. The blockade was intended to force regime change, but it has left civilians desperate for basic resources and public transport. Experts believe this single shipment could provide enough diesel to meet Cuba's daily demand for about 10 days. Trump dismissed concerns that this move helps Vladimir Putin, arguing that Russia is simply losing a boatload of oil. It is a rare moment of humanitarian leniency in a geopolitical tug-of-war that has lasted for decades, though the long-term policy toward the island remains very restrictive.
Next, the shutdown. The partial government shutdown has officially become the longest in American history, reaching 44 days this Sunday. The impasse centers on funding for the Department of Homeland Security, and the effects are being felt acutely at airports across the country. A shortage of TSA officers who are currently working without pay has led to significant travel delays and security checkpoint chaos. While President Trump signed an order attempting to free up cash for these workers, it remains unclear if this will hold up legally. The Constitution gives Congress the sole authority to authorize federal spending, and lawmakers are currently on a 2-week break without a deal in sight.
White House Border Czar Tom Homan mentioned that TSA agents might start seeing paychecks early next week, but the political feud shows no signs of cooling. The Senate passed a compromise deal to partially fund the department, but House Republicans rejected it in favor of a short-term measure that the Senate is unlikely to approve. This shutdown affects not just the TSA, but also immigration agencies and the primary emergency agency for natural disasters. With the previous record of 43 days now surpassed, the human cost for federal employees is mounting, as they miss multiple paychecks while being required to perform essential security duties for the nation.
Regarding airport security, even if TSA workers finally get paid, immigration and customs enforcement agents might remain stationed at U.S. airports for the foreseeable future. Border Czar Tom Homan told CNN that the presence of ICE agents depends on how many TSA workers actually return to their posts. Reports indicate that over 480 TSA employees have already quit, and absence rates have hit 40% at some major hubs. ICE officers have been filling the gaps by checking identifications and handling basic security tasks, which allows the remaining trained TSA staff to focus on technical duties like operating luggage scanners. It is a temporary fix for a systemic staffing crisis.
This situation is dire for the 50,000 transportation security workers who have been forced to work without pay. Homan noted that many are struggling to feed their families or pay rent, which is why the administration is scrambling to find funds outside of the usual congressional channels. While wait times at some airports like Houston have reportedly decreased since ICE agents arrived, the long-term stability of airport security is in question. If a significant portion of the workforce has permanently left for other jobs, the Department of Homeland Security will face a massive recruiting and training hurdle once the government finally reopens and the funding is restored.
Now, the Pope. Pope Leo XIV used his Palm Sunday message to deliver a stinging rebuke to world leaders who use religion to justify violence. Speaking in St. Peter's Square, the pontiff described Jesus as a king of peace who rejects war, stating that God does not listen to the prayers of those whose hands are full of blood. This message seemed aimed at the growing trend of Christian nationalism, particularly in the U.S., where officials like Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth have framed the war with Iran in religious terms. Hegseth recently called for overwhelming violence of action against enemies during a worship service held at the Pentagon.
The Pope's comments highlight a deep theological divide. While some administration followers see the military conflict as a righteous struggle, the Vatican is focusing on the crucified humanity suffering in the Middle East. Pope Leo expressed deep concern for Christians in the region who are unable to observe Holy Week due to the brutal conflict. He specifically mentioned those who are crushed, sick, and alone as victims of this ongoing violence. This comes at a time when Israel is also facing backlash for blocking religious processions in Jerusalem, further complicating the intersection of faith and the geopolitical crises currently unfolding across the globe.
Next, Senator Lankford. Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma defended President Trump's decision to deploy thousands of troops to the Middle East, arguing that boots on the ground are necessary to pressure Iran. During an interview on Meet the Press, Lankford stated that the arrival of 5,000 Marines and members of the 82nd Airborne creates the contingencies needed to finish peace negotiations. He argued that while no one wants a war, the U.S. must show it is the strongest fighting force to make Iran stop its attacks. The Pentagon is reportedly seeking to send up to 10,000 additional ground troops as part of Operation Epic Fury to expand military options.
When pressed on whether the president needs congressional approval for this deployment, Lankford was somewhat evasive. He suggested that a long-standing war like those in Iraq or Afghanistan would require a vote, but a short-term mission to protect Americans might be different. This highlights the ongoing debate over executive war powers as the conflict enters its second month. Lankford maintains that ratcheting up the pressure is the only way to force Tehran into a deal. However, critics worry that increasing a troop presence so significantly only makes a full-scale ground war more likely, especially as Iran continues to signal that it will meet any intervention with force.
Now, Vice President Vance. Vice President J.D. Vance recently shared a spiritual perspective on UFO sightings, suggesting that these unidentified aerial phenomena might actually be demons. In an interview with podcaster Benny Johnson, Vance expressed curiosity about government research, but noted that he views these celestial beings through the lens of his Catholic faith. He argued that every great religion acknowledges the existence of unexplained, otherworldly things. Vance suggested that one of the devil's greatest tricks is convincing people he doesn't exist, and he naturally associates extra-natural phenomena with the presence of evil in the world. It is a unique take from the nation's second highest official on a topic usually reserved for science fiction.
This discussion comes as President Trump has promised to release government files related to alien life and UFOs. Vance mentioned that Secretary of State Marco Rubio also shares a fascination with the topic, dating back to their time together in the Senate. While the vice president admitted to putting on the tinfoil hat occasionally, his framing of the issue as a spiritual battle adds a new layer to the administration's approach to transparency. Whether the public will get definitive answers from the promised file release remains to be seen. But the administration is clearly leaning into the mystery, combining national security interests with a dose of theological speculation.
Finally, the protests. The No Kings rallies drew millions of people across the United States yesterday, marking the largest protests of President Trump's second term so far. Organizers held over 3,000 separate events to voice opposition to what they call an authoritarian approach to the presidency. While the White House dismissed the gatherings as Trump derangement therapy sessions, political analysts suggest the energy is a significant sign for the upcoming midterm elections. Protesters weren't just focused on one issue. They marched against the Iran war, the treatment of immigrants, the rising cost of living, and new voting restrictions. This broad coalition represents a significant surge in Democratic grassroots activity.
Despite the administration's dismissive tone, the sheer scale of these protests is hard to ignore. In a deeply divided country, these events serve as a focal point for those who feel marginalized by the current policy direction. Interestingly, even with the Democratic Party facing low popularity in some polls, their candidates have seen recent successes in state-level elections, including flipping seats in Florida. The No Kings movement seems to be channeling general frustration into a organized political force. As the war in Iran enters its second month and domestic tensions over the shutdown continue, these rallies indicate that the opposition is becoming more coordinated and energized for the battles ahead.
That's our briefing for today. Join us again tomorrow for more focused coverage of the stories that matter. Be sure to follow the show to stay updated on every major development.